The NFL Draft is easily the most exhilarating piece of any professional sports offseason. It's where teams can turn their franchises around.
Second pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Houston Texans select C.J. Stroud.
Or completely ruin them.
The second pick in the 2017 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears select Mitchell Trubisky.
While the hope of new beginnings for many fan bases is a major reason as to why the draft is so entertaining, it's the unpredictability that makes it truly fascinating.
Are you shitting me? So Jordan Love shows a lot of potential.
From drafting a dead player, players refusing to play for that team, and even teams getting their picks completely skipped, these are some of the strangest moments in NFL draft history. The NFL's inaugural draft took place in 1936, and to give some context of the league at that time, it consisted of 9 teams that honestly, their team names sounded like some MLB team names, with names like the Boston Redskins, Brooklyn Dodgers, Pittsburgh Pirates, and Chicago Cardinals. A season only consisted of 12 games, players donned leather caps, and the football we know today was instead rounder and wider, similar to a pill. I mean, the game was completely unrecognizable as we know it today, and as you'd expect, the draft went somewhat terrible. It was so bad this team drafted dead players. The Philadelphia Eagles held the first ever NFL draft pick, and at number 1 overall, they selected Jay Berwagner, the Heisman-winning halfback out of Chicago. Berwagner seemed to be a home run pick for the Eagles, but as it turned out, he had other plans in mind. He never played a snap of football. The first ever Heisman winner dropped a line for the ages when speaking to the Chicago Tribune in a report about his predicament, saying, "I didn't play pro because they weren't paying any money. I didn't get hit making speeches at high school and in clubs, but I got indigestion from corned beef and mashed potato dinners." He did pass away in 2002, but will go down as one of the most interesting cases in the NFL, and the first and only number 1 overall pick to never play a single down in the league. And while he had the choice to not play, at least he had that luxury, which was unfortunately not afforded to either Darnell Robertson or James Egink, of both whom were selected in the CFL draft in 1995 and 1996, despite neither of them being alive. And yes, I know it's not technically an NFL draft, but I mean, I can't just leave that interesting and somewhat strange pick out. Both men had sadly passed away in the months leading up to the draft, and nobody close to the league had known about it until it was too late. This next guy, though, didn't care what they said. He wasn't going to play for the team that drafted him. In 1995, the Oakland Raiders selected BYU lineman Eli Herring. Despite him saying that he wouldn't play football in the NFL due to religious complications with their games taking place on Sunday, when the Raiders selected him in the 6th round, he simply said he wasn't going to play. It's hard to say exactly what the Raiders were thinking with this one, but I think it's safe to say players declining to play had an overall positive impact on their franchise, because just 9 years prior, multi-sport superstar Bo Jackson declined to play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after being drafted 1st overall, and instead signing with the Kansas City Royals to play pro baseball. Just 1 year later, Jackson re-entered the NFL draft and was selected by the Raiders after falling to the 7th round. Although his career in the NFL was cut short due to an unfortunate injury, Bo Jackson will forever be remembered as a Raiders legend and one of the most talented running backs in NFL history. And while staying on the topic of two-sport athletes, Jimmy Walker became one of the only people to ever be the first pick in one professional sport and the last pick in another, when the Saints selected him in the 17th round in 1967. Walker really was never a two-sport athlete. He never managed to play college football, which is why this pick is so strange. Thankfully, Walker, like Bo, knew what was best and chose to play in the NBA, where he would be a 2-time All-Star. Someone who didn't know best, though, was New Orleans Saints head coach Mike Ditka. Ditka is best known as the Hall of Fame coach of the '85 Bears, and he probably should have stuck to coaching and stayed away from management, because in 1999, he made NFL history by trading all of his NFL draft picks, yes, all of them, plus a 1st and 3rd rounder in the next draft, all to move up 7 spots in in the first round and select Ricky Williams 5th overall. And to nobody's surprise, the Saints struggled that season and Ditka was fired. Ricky Williams spent just 3 years in New Orleans before heading to Miami. Although the Saints would never, because this next guy started his career in what you could say as a pretty smoky way. Just a few minutes prior to the draft starting, his Twitter account was hacked. The hacker released a video of him smoking a bong that was crudely attached to a gas mask. And as crazy as it is, the Ravens and several other teams needing a left tackle passed on him simply because of the video, causing him to fall all the way to the Miami Dolphins with the 13th overall pick. Tunsil proved to be one of the more successful crazy draft stories. He now plays for the Houston Texans and has had a relatively uncontroversial start to his career while being regarded as one of the best left tackles in football for several years now. While Tunsil was probably happy to go to the Dolphins, who trusted his character and believed in him as an organization, of course not every player is satisfied with their draft destination. And probably the most notable examples of players that were pretty unhappy of where they got drafted was that of Cedric Benson, who literally cried when he got drafted by the Bengals. One of the downsides of being a top prospect in the NFL draft is that it means you're probably going to be selected by a bad team. This is exactly the case for Benson, the electric college running back who was fresh off of a 2,000 scrimmage yard season for Texas. He was projected to be selected by the Bears with the 4th overall pick in 2005. Prior to being picked, Benson's agent had a last-minute phone call with Bears manager Jerry Angelo, requesting that the Bears not select him due to contract disagreements. And the Bears didn't care, and the Bears carried out their plan regardless. Benson was in attendance at the NFL's in-person draft coverage, so when he heard the news, cameras showed him visibly distraught at the scene. And as you might expect, things didn't work out between Benson and the Bears. His rookie season kicked off with a 36-day contract holdout that caused him to miss the entirety of training camp, and upon his return, several teammates started intentionally trying to injure him in practice. After an unsuccessful 3-year stint with Chicago, Benson eclipsed the 1,000-yard rushing mark 3 times in the next 4 years with the Bengals, and ultimately retired after 7 seasons of a successful career. And although Cedric Benson's draft day story really isn't ideal, at least the guy got to see or got to know that he was drafted, because this next guy literally had no clue until he looked at a newspaper. Norm Michael was selected by the Eagles in the 18th round of the 1944 NFL draft. The only problem was that Michael had already enlisted into the military before he was drafted, and without cell phones, there was no easy way for the Eagles to contact him. After all, the 18th round of a draft in 1944 probably wasn't primetime TV, if they had TVs. So Norm never found out that he had been picked until he was looking through a newspaper column listing every Syracuse player to be drafted, when to his shock, he found his name. A similar thing happened to the Raiders when they drafted a Notre Dame receiver by the name of Rocket Ismail, who had no clue he had been drafted either. Instead of being enlisted in the military though, Rocket had already signed a contract with the Toronto Argonauts of the CFL that was more lucrative than anything the NFL was going to offer him. And after several seasons in the CFL, Rocket did eventually play for the Raiders, among other teams, and though he never reached the heights many thought he would, he did have a long career in professional football. The next guy though would break your back in a WWE ring and then go to the NFL right after. WWE wrestler Brock Lesnar, famous actor Terry Crews, or Fred Williamson, who acted in both From Dusk Till Dawn and Starsky and Hutch. And while all those guys did play football to some degree, there's one name that stands out much more than both of those guys. A Hollywood actor by the name of John Wayne. Yes, that John Wayne. In the 17th and final round of the 1972 NFL draft, I guess the Atlanta Falcons didn't have anyone left on their draft board or just wanted to have a little fun, but when it came their turn to make a selection, head coach Norm Van Brocklin said at the podium, "Do we want the roughest, toughest son of a bitch in the draft?" Atlanta picks John Wayne of Fort Apache State. Wayne was one of the brightest stars in the Hollywood Golden Age from the 1920s all the way until his late life in the mid-70s. And he was known for playing countless roles in westerns and war movies, but to draft a guy that's 65 years old and suit up for the Falcons, I don't really think that's what they wanted. And not to mention that the NFL commissioner at the time, Pete Rozelle, didn't allow the pick to go through. All in all though, it was a great tribute to one of the greatest icons, and I'm sure he got a good laugh out of it too. But believe it or not, the commissioner disallowing that pick by the Falcons wasn't the only time that that's happened. It also happened when the Redskins used the 9th overall pick in the 1946 NFL draft to acquire California running back Cal Rosey. Washington must not have taken their scouting too seriously because Rosey was still ineligible as a junior in college. Redskins GM Sid Carroll wouldn't take no for an answer. In the very next year, selected Rosey jersey once again in the first round, only for him to decline the offer and never set foot on an NFL football field. Like, I mean, clearly before any of the draft merger or before 1966 was just complete utter chaos. In 1973, the Redskins were at it again when head coach George Allen traded the same draft pick to two different teams on two separate occasions. And the craziest part is that he got away with it. Like, I mean, nobody had seemed to notice, but I mean, he did eventually get caught and was fined $5,000 because of that trade. And now, yes, I know that a lot of these draft examples do come from a while back, but there have been some recently as of like 2012 between the Eagles and Patriots of all teams too. A stat was floating around that the Patriots had oddly made draft day trades with the Eagles for 10 straight seasons. And just when it looked like that might come to an end, the usually hyper serious Bill Belichick traded the 193rd pick for the 194th pick straight up. And I mean, who knows? Maybe he just got super bored on the third day of the draft and was just like, hey, let's just make this trade for the hell of it. But I mean, I don't really know. That's pretty funny though. While it can bring joy to watch your favorite team show some humor like this late in the draft, carelessness like this in the first round could be detrimental to a team's draft day plans. I mean, after all, in the very same draft as the Patriots shenanigans, the Baltimore Ravens forgot about the 15-minute time window while on the clock for the 26th overall pick and failed to submit their selection in time amidst trade talks with Chicago. In that time, Kansas City was able to pass them up and select Jonathan Baldwin before Baltimore finally took Jimmy Smith. And I mean, essentially the same thing happened to the Minnesota Vikings also. Holding the 7th pick in the 2003 draft, couldn't make their pick in time, allowing the Jags and Ravens to swoop in and make their selections first. I mean, things did work out pretty well for the Vikings in the end, who took 6-time Pro Bowl defensive end Kevin Green as the 9th man off the board. Once again though, in the 2011 draft, which was historically strange, the Cleveland Browns accidentally called the wrong player to congratulate them on their selection. Both star defensive end Cameron Jordan and USC tight end Jordan Cameron were a part of the same draft class. And Cleveland drafted the later with the 102nd pick. Despite drafting Jordan Cameron, the Browns accidentally called Cameron Jordan to introduce themselves before an awkward conversation caused them to realize what had happened.
We were driving from the airport and I got a call from the Browns, called down. They're like, hey, we're about to select you. And I was like, I mean, I'm good, actually. I think I've already been selected. But if you want to send that check, I'll take that.
Okay, so you had already been taken in the first round, so this was the next day.
Right.
And you were going to get drafted by the Browns.
No doubt. No doubt. And sitting there, you're just like, I mean, I'll take 2 signing bonuses, but I refuse to go to Cleveland.
And a similar thing happened to the Buccaneers back in 1982 when they gave it to the guy that runs the pickup and he submitted the wrong name to the draft people. Tampa Bay accidentally selected Sean Farrell, who had a successful NFL career, but when Booker Reese, their initial first-round target, was still on the board in round 2, it was an opportunity Tampa Bay couldn't pass up. Ultimately, Reese didn't pan out to be what they thought he would, so I mean, Tampa Bay's first-round era actually helped them out in the long run. The NFL draft is entirely unpredictable. As soon as the first team is on the clock, anything goes. And honestly, I really don't know what might be the most unpredictable moment of the 2024 draft this year. One thing we do know is we have one of the rarest occurrences in football happening this year. The selection of a white cornerback in Iowa's own Cooper DeJean. The last white cornerback to consistently start in the NFL was Jason Sehorn on the New York Giants, who retired all the way back in 2003. The lack of white cornerbacks in the NFL is an unexplainable oddity, and there's nothing like it in other sports. But I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below. What are your favorite strangest draft moments or one that you remember from the past? Let me know down below, and as always, I will catch you guys in the next one.